This and the following lecture are going to look at primate taxonomy. This will essentially be an introduction to the specific groups and subgroups of non-human primates that we'll discuss in this part of the module. There's going to be a lot of information and it might seem overwhelming, so a good way to study and remember each of these individual groups is to think about specific features that define individual either apes, monkeys, or strepsirrhines. It's also going to be helpful for you to use the taxonomy sheet that I provided. Maybe keep it with you as you're taking notes throughout the lecture. But with that, it's time to be introduced to some pretty remarkable non-human primates all around the world. Primate taxonomy is going to, again, involve an introduction to all the different non-human primates. So for this lecture, we're going to be looking at the kind of more simplistic of the primates. Those will be the strepsirrhines and then kind of this anomalous group known as the tarsiers. Primates fall under the domain Eukarya. So they're eukaryotes, they're multi-cell species within the animal kingdom, Animalia, the phylum Chordata, the class Mammalia, and the order Primates. And within that order, we have two suborders, the haplorhines and the strepsirrhines, so named for the supposed shape of their relative noses. Primates are remarkable because we are talking about ones that can be as small as your hand to ones that are twice the size of some humans. In total, there are over 200 species and 600 subspecies of primates. Although many of us may see non-human primates in areas throughout the globe, mainly because they are in either captivity, in zoos, and refuges, where we actually see non-human primates naturally occurring are in the New World, so Central America, South America, in Africa, outside of the basically Saharan zones and more of the tropics and jungle areas, as well as in Asia, in Southern Asia. We define these areas again as the New World and the Old World. It should also be noted that where we're actually seeing non-human primates are in climates that are generally warmer or closer to the equator. So non-human primates aren't really migrating to places, and they don't really have the capabilities to go somewhere warmer, and they don't have clothes to put on when it starts to get cooler. So they tend to stay around, again, these kind of tropical climates or mountainous regions frequently. Here is just a quick look at the order Primates, and we can go into the suborder, infraorder, superfamilies, families, genus, and into species. But as you can see from left to right, there is a wide diversity of primates that you'll be introduced to. You won't be expected to know all the primates, unless you want to be a primatologist, which is great. You can go learn all about primates in your spare time. But for the sake of this part of the module, I want you to focus on specific primates or specific features associated with primates. We'll be discussing behaviors, living groups, evidence of culture, and for those examples, it would be good for you to know specific primates associated with them. The first suborder we're going to look at today are the strepsirrhines, or the strepsirrhini. And those break down into the infraorder Lemuriformes And then ultimately, we're going to look at more the superfamilies, which are the lemurs and the lorises. So let's start to look at these strepsirrhines. First of all, they're often described as the most primitive of primates. That means they have the most ancestral features. And we'll see that as we discuss certain features. They were called prosimians, and the haplorhines were known as simians. So essentially, they've been thought of as the ancestral primates. The distribution of strepsirrhines is limited to Africa, Asia, and then Madagascar, which is a specific island off Africa. So exclusively in the Old World. Something that's really important about strepsirrhines that characterizes them from other primates is that they actually have a rhinarium. Remember, a rhinarium is something that is kind of like a dog's snout, a little wet. And they have something known as prognathism. Literally, it means that their kind of nose comes forward and makes kind of like a snout. Humans, for example, by comparison, are orthognathic, so they have a flat face. But strepsirrhines have a more prognathic face, and prognathism oftentimes is an ancestral feature. And they also have a more defined olfactory bulb. So all of these features indicate that strepsirrhines, again, have a greater sense of smell. And there's ultimately an adaptive reason for this. Another feature that is exclusive to strepsirrhines, and again, it's more ancestral, is the retention of a second claw on their feet, and the second digit specifically. Here you can see it on the hind foot of a galago. It's sometimes called the toilet claw, which is a nice image for you there. But essentially, this is helping them to groom either themselves or other galagos. But generally, it's their self-grooming or maybe with offspring. They also can have the presence of a tooth comb. Here we have the lower jaw of the lemur. Again, this was shown in the previous lecture, but you see these long, these elongated incisors. And again, they look like combs, like teeth on a comb. And they're used for self-grooming or grooming, again, generally with just close family members. And then lastly, most strepsirrhines are nocturnal. This is a very ancestral trait. Being nocturnal is associated with more ancestral species, for example. This can also account for why they are so dependent on smell relative to other primates. However, don't get me wrong, in terms of smell, it's not like their smell compares to that of a dog's sense of smell, but relative to other primates, it is more advanced. Another feature associated with this nocturnal lifestyle is a specific type of tissue and film in the back and in the eyes. It's called the tapetum lucidum, and essentially allows them to take in more light and see in the dark, which obviously if they're nocturnal would be very, very beneficial. This is a really interesting feature, and it's something that we can see in other animals as well. For example, this is a picture of one of my friend's cats, Leo, and I always like to think of the fact that he's a tapetum lucidum means that he has laser eyes. So when you take pictures of him, it comes really bright and all. So at least when I'm thinking about tapetum lucidum, this might not help you guys, but I literally think of a superpower in these primates, like literally the ability to have eyes that shoot laser beams and allow them to see in the dark. Not entirely accurate to what's happening, but knowing that the tapetum lucidum is there is very beneficial to these primates in terms of their nocturnal lifestyle. So that's again something that is exclusive to strepsirrhines. Another thing that we see in strepsirrhines is limited orbital convergence. So this is essentially the sense of depth perception is more limited in strepsirrhines than in, let's say, haplorhines or other species of primates. And this has to do with them only having that postorbital bar. Remember, I mentioned that primates have a postorbital bar, and that's one of the really important features in all primates. But strepsirrhines don't have postorbital closure. And so in a sense, their eyes are a little bit more wobbly, and they're not as faced forward. And so there's not as much overlap in terms of their sight, and they don't have as good of a depth perception as other primates. For this reason, a lot of strepsirrhines, who are nocturnal especially, are sometimes really slow moving because they can't see very far distances or they can't judge distance very well. But this again is one of those ancestral features and one of the reasons that we consider strepsirrhines again more primitive of the current living primates. The first strepsirrhine group that we'll look at are the lorises. And these include the lorises and the podos. And they're also known kind of more informally as bush babies. The lorises and the podos reside primarily in Africa and also Southeast Asia, so in more forested climates. And that's because they're primarily arboreal. They tend to be very slow and deliberate in their movements, although some can move rather quickly. And they are nocturnal again, as they are strepsirrhines. Part of the slow and deliberate movement, as you can imagine, has to do with them being nocturnal and also not having that full convergence in their eyesight. So they don't have the best sense of depth perception. And if that's the case, you don't want to be running very quickly through or kind of hopping from branch to branch quickly through trees if you don't know how far away the next branch is to grab onto. But to see an example of a loris and podo, I'm going to show you some from the zoo that were taken a little while ago in the next slide, so you can see in action what these species are like. So that was an example of a mother podo and her young, again, moving through the trees. Very slow, very purposefully. That might be a nice video to think of when you're trying to recall what lorises and podos look like, how they behave, and consequently the biologies associated with that arboreal adaptive behavior. Another group of strepsirrhines we have are the galagos. The galagos reside exclusively in Africa on the continent, and while being nocturnal like lorises and podos, they are conversely very rapid moving little primates. So they kind of bound and bounce around in the trees. Their eyes are considerably larger, so this might have to do again with a better sense of sight and depth perception in that case. They also have big ears, which allow them to, again, have a better sense of hearing. And these features are thought to allow them to get a better sense of their surroundings and consequently be safer at moving rapidly in the trees, unlike the slow-moving loris. Lastly, we have the lemurs of the strepsirrhines. The lemurs reside naturally in Madagascar, and this is an island off Africa. The lemurs experienced an adaptive radiation event from a single ancestor roughly 5 million years ago. So what this means is 50 million years ago, an initial lemur ancestor came to the island and then, much like the finches in the Galapagos, evolved into different lemurs based on different ecological niches that they were inhabiting. For this reason, we have more lemurs than any other type of primate. Over a fifth of all primate genera are lemurs because there's so many different climates in Madagascar and so many different lemurs as a result. One specific species of lemur that we're going to focus on here is known as the aye-aye. And the reason I'm going to focus on it is because it's been called the most specialized of all primates. The aye-aye, while being not always the most attractive of all the non-human primates, is remarkable in its overall biology because it has evolved for specific hunting and foraging techniques. Aye-ayes tend to essentially dig into tree trunks and hunt around for larvae that are growing in the trees. And so to do this, they require specialized traits. One of those is a continuously growing incisor. So this would kind of be like beavers or rodents, basically, that are continuously gnawing at wood or things, and therefore wearing down their incisors to nubs. So aye-ayes, like these rodents, have continuously growing incisors so that they essentially don't wear down their incisors to nothing. This means too that they don't have a tooth cone if their incisors again are used specifically for food extraction. They do have something rather unusual, and you can kind of see it in this image there, is a secondarily evolved claw. So this is actually a middle claw that has a ball and socket joint, so it kind of pivots around. And as we'll see in a future video, it allows them to kind of move around and dig and fish in a way for larvae inside very closed, confined tree trunks. So aye-ayes use a specific form of food foraging known as percussive foraging. And they do this with an elongated middle finger. So this process involves essentially tapping trees for looking for hollow and non-hollow spaces. And once they are able to locate areas where there might be some kind of food larva, they, again, with their teeth, chomp into the trunk and then subsequently use their elongated middle digit to extract that food. To hear, again, these specific hollows as they're tapping on the trunks, they also have these large dish-like ears. So they kind of put them up against the trunk to do so. Aye-ayes, however, as we said, are strepsirrhines, so they are nocturnal. They have very small eyes, but again, the ability to have these dish-like ears allows them to find food successfully.
This is the aye-aye, a kind of lemur found only on the island of Madagascar. Local legends cast it as a demon, a creature that can kill just by pointing a finger. The truth is more natural than supernatural, but they're right about the finger. To find its prey, it uses a multi-purpose digit. The changes in sound build a mental map of hollow channels inside. It cups its ears to gather the slightest vibration that could signify something to eat, like a grub. Sharp incisors rip away the bark. Its bony middle finger changes roles from a scanner to a scraper. It claws in and out of gaps, enlarging the hole. The grub doesn't know what the aye-aye is, but it does know what it means. Death, if it can't wriggle away. The aye-aye locks in. The finger transforms into a hook. A sharp fingernail impales the grub. It's dragged up, out, and into the aye-aye's mouth.
So after leaving that very happy aye-aye who got his I guess dinner there, we're going to move on to the haplorhines. So we previously dealt with the suborder strepsirrhines, but that's only, again, a small portion of all of the non-human primates. The haplorhines are immediately divided into the tarsiers, tarsiiforms, and the anthropoids, anthropoidea. The anthropoids include monkeys, apes, and yes, humans. But we'll deal with that in the next lecture. The tarsiers are a rather anomalous type of primate. For a while, they actually used to be lumped with the strepsirrhines, and they were all of them called prosimians. But more recently, they've discovered through genetic reassessments that tarsiers are actually closer to anthropoids and therefore part of the haplorhine suborder. The reason tarsiers are such an anomaly is that they are a combination of strepsirrhine, so ancestral, and haplorhine, so derived features. We'll discuss some of those specifically. But it's for this reason that for so long primatologists had difficulty finding a place for tarsiers, trying to group them. Do they go with strepsirrhines? Do they go with the haplorhines? Are they simians? Are they prosimians? But as it stands, they're part of the haplorhines. Some of the ancestral features that tarsiers show, so these features are like strepsirrhine ones, are that they have an unfused mandible and frontal bone. Their locomotive style is very similar to strepsirrhines in terms of them being arboreal. They also have grooming claws, so again, that secondary digit. And unlike anthropoids, they're nocturnal. However, the tarsiers show just as many or even more haploid features. The first is that they don't have a rhinarium. They don't have that kind of wet snout. So their sense of smell is significantly reduced relative to other strepsirrhines. They lack a tapetum lucidum even though they are nocturnal. And the reason for this is that they have massive eyes. I can't even begin to tell you how large these eyes are. They're so big, in fact, that they can't move their eyes to look left or right. They literally have to move their heads to look at things. You can see a comparison between a tarsier with its brain versus its eye and a human there on the right. So their eyes are actually bigger than their brains. They also have no tooth comb. So despite having a grooming claw, which is used for grooming, they lack the tooth comb. And the other feature, which is actually kind of a unique feature to tarsiers, is that they have partial postorbital closure. So they have the postorbital bar, like all primates, but as you can see, there's kind of a bit of bone there in the back here that's closed off. However, we call it partial because there's still a gap in between the bar and the back of the orbit. Other unique features aside from its partial postorbital closure is the presence of a grooming claw on both digits, so 2s and 3rds, whereas in other strepsirrhines, the grooming claw is on 2nd digit. And it is the only primate that is entirely frugnivorous. So it's the only primate that eats animals exclusively. And I don't want you to think animals in terms of like other mammals, but more things like lizards and frogs and reptiles and amphibians.
Here we will learn true facts about the tarsier. The tarsier is one of nature's smallest primates. The pygmy mouse lemur is smaller, but you know that if you're being compared to something called the pygmy mouse anything, you're really, really damn small. The tarsier is named... Whoa! Hello there, freaky. The tarsier is named after its long, impressive bone in its ankle, you perv. The tarsier uses its powerful legs to jump and cling on to things with the aid of its padded and freakishly long fingers. It disguises itself in the forest by pretending to be a small teddy bear, undergoing a colonoscopy. It blends in magically. You may not have noticed, but the tarsier has very large eyes. They are in fact the largest in relation to its body of any mammal. Each one of its eyes is heavier than its brain, which might explain why it hasn't invented anything. The eyes are so big that they cannot rotate in their sockets. The tarsier must stare straight ahead and swivel its neck to look... Holy crap, did you see that? It's like exorcist shit. If you challenged a tarsier to a staring contest, it wouldn't understand a word you said, but it would stare at you and you would think that was apropos. The tarsier wouldn't really think anything and would probably just make a pee-pee. The tarsier is the only entirely carnivorous primate, eating insects, rodents, reptiles, and small birds. This, incidentally, is the cover of the children's book, Lizard Has a Shitty Day. Within 1 day of being born, the tarsier can climb a tree. A human baby of the same age can do nothing. At 4 months old, the tarsier... It's too creepy. At 4 months... Oh, God. What's over here? Remember, always eat your vegetables, or you'll look like a freaky, freaky little tarsier.